Alrighty, so today I want to share some insight with you about becoming a parent after experiencing 40 years of narcissistic abuse from my mother. And, you'd think that as an adult, you'd not want to get married and have a family after having kind of a traumatic childhood experience. But I think if you're able to have that experience and come out of it with some understanding and knowledge and insight for yourself and others, it's actually going to make you a better parent. And so just some things that you can expect if you're struggling with moving through your narcissistic abuse and say you want to become a parent or you are a parent. The first thing that started happening for me was I started having a lot of flashbacks, and I guess it's PTSD, but anyway, it's interesting how children they're like these little mirrors, and they end up kind of showing you or reminding you of things that happened to you, experiences you had. And it can be challenging because the kid, say if the kid's having kind of emotional freak out or something, it might trigger something in you that you experienced as a child when maybe you're being emotional. And then the natural reaction might be to behave how you were treated. And I think that's common, but once you start moving through and processing your narcissistic abuse, you get this bird's eye view of emotional situations, traumatic situations, and it allows you to act with more experience and empathy. And so what's happened for me, fortunately, is I'm able to avoid repeating what my narcissistic mother would do to me, like things like, oh, you're too emotional, or I don't have time to listen to you, or just kind of like not validating a child's emotional response or emotional state that they're in. So a lot of it with children that I'm realizing is just really being present for them, 100%, as much as the time, being present and showing up. That's just such a huge part of a child's development and sense of safety and self, is the parent really being available to them. And that is sacrificing a lot for the parents. And a lot of what I experienced was kind of guilt towards just the fact that I'm there. Common thing was like, oh, my life is over because of these kids. It was more like, fuck, my life is over, fuck these kids. And I heard that a ton growing up. And so unfortunately for children, there's these early developmental years where they're starting to understand their sense of self, and that's your core beliefs. And what ends up happening is early on in the child's life, they're discovering a sense of self, and then they're trying to understand how they relate and perceive themselves and other people and the world around them. And then what ends up happening is they're interpreting events in their life that then give them this understanding of themselves, other people, and the world. And ideally, you want positive events that give children, and ultimately when they become adults, a more positive outlook on life. But the problem is that these like neurological pathways form early in life, and then they're hardwired in, and then everything you do from that point on is based upon that hardwiring. And what's interesting in my case was that hardwiring dictated how I viewed myself, other people, in the world for like 40 years. And for myself, it was largely negative. the view of myself was insecure and not confident, and I always thought I had to change myself. View of other people was you cannot trust other people at all. And a view of the world is it's a dangerous place, and don't go into the world. I was just had this thing of like, don't leave your safety kind of sheltered life. And that is a troubling way to live. and it's sad, but it can change, and I did change that. And part of having children helped me do that. And so now, understanding this stuff and really pursuing the truth about experiences that I had in childhood, and then how it dictates my behavior, and then ultimately changing that. Now parenting, it's like, I think that narcissistically abused people who become parents and who are working through and have worked through their traumatic abuse are going to be better parents than, say, like just a standard, husband and wife or single parent, whatever, that just kind of like, they just had their bland standard life, nothing, they didn't experience any hardship, and they're just kind of like cookie cutter people. I think their experience in parenting isn't going to be as rich or fruitful as someone that has endured a hardship. So I think it's a gift that these hardships come into our life, and then if we choose, to confront them, and if we choose to understand them and get to the truth, it makes us have this, it's such a unique perspective. And if we can impart that perspective on children, especially raising them, and especially because narcissistic abuse is all about emotional, psychological, and mental manipulation and abuse in that form, you then can start teaching your children, about emotional maturity and understanding your emotions. Like my daughter, likes to express her emotions. She's very expressive in that, whether it's happy or sad or mad or whatever. She's very expressive, and that can be very challenging. But what's interesting is the way my wife and I handle that is really, we're just trying to impart awareness on her, and so she can become aware of how her feelings and her emotions that she's experiencing in that moment are, affecting her, and then also people around her. And she's 6 years old, but she's really developed this sense of emotional awareness, and she's really cognizant of other people's emotions and how other people feel. And so she's already got this sense of empathy ingrained into her, and awareness of emotion at a really young age. And it's really cool to see. And we're not like pushing things on her, like you have to do this, you have to be that. It's more, we're just kind of letting her, it's like you kind of plant the seed, and then the tree grows, and then they can kind of, and then they'll reap the fruit. They'll bear the fruit of that tree that's of knowledge that's in them, and then they can reflect. And so she's already kind of in a reflective state and place with those experiences. So obviously parenting isn't easy, and especially I don't think you ever get over this emotional, mental, psychological trauma that you experience. But it's extremely rewarding to take the challenge on, and I feel that parenting and having children and being a part of children's lives it's part of the healing. It's part of moving on, because all this happens, the majority of the big damage happens in childhood. And if you can help children and help other parents as well, because now, you know, like my daughter's in grade school, so now I'm interacting with all these other parents, and they're just kind of random people. The only thing we have in common is the fact that our kids go to the same school. But it's interesting to observe the other parents' behavior, and especially near where we live is kind of this. It's like a lot of it's a lot of baby boomers, and then there's like millennials, and all the millennials that live there, they don't have jobs. They're just kind of funded by their parents, and they have like, you know, big homes and these kind of like nonchalant lifestyles. But it's interesting observing them and how they interact with their children. And a lot of the interactions that I see is they're really dismissive of the children. They're like on their phones constantly, and you know, like we'll go to these family events, you know, like a birthday party for the kid, and like the kid, you know, has to go to the bathroom or is hungry or whatever, and the kind of typical reaction with the parents are just ignoring the kid because they're on their phone, or they're, you know, talking with another parent about, you know, whatever, and I can tell, like, I don't know, you know, I'm not trying to judge these people, but these people, I can tell, like, they've had zero hardships in their life. I'm sure everything has been handed to them and whatever, but it does go to show that when we've experienced this narcissistic abuse and we're grappling with understanding what we're feeling and everything that's coming from that, and starting parenting from that place, I mean, man, I feel like we really have an opportunity to raise, you know, unique and different, and these like really emotionally, psychologically, and just real aware children. And so I think it's worth it. You know, you might feel discouraged with getting married and having children, or even maybe you can't have children, but you know, you can still be supportive in children's lives, and you could adopt a kid. I mean, you know, you could help your friends out, but I think it's really valuable, and I think we need more people who are empathetic, deeply empathetic, and who can understand what another person is experiencing. And really, that's what it's all about, because we need a higher level in society with people and how they're interacting with each other, how they're interacting with themselves. Society has really brought the level down, and people have accepted that. And obviously, one of the symptoms is this rampant narcissistic abuse that we're all experiencing and we're witnessing the fallout of. So I encourage you to become a parent. I think it's well worth it. So anyway, I hope this was informative and a good talk. I mean, obviously I'm going to keep, because I'm a parent, I have 2 kids right now, I'm going to keep sharing, you know, as this evolves, and what I'm learning from it, because it's extremely valuable. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.